So, the October surprise has arrived for Kamala Harris because it turns out that people bothered to read her dreadful 2009 book and went, oh, hang on a minute, you've stolen stories from Martin Luther King and Wikipedia.
What, really?
Really.
Wait, she can write?
Dictate. As we've learned in the public sphere, most people don't write their own books, and Kamala Harris is certainly one of them. Not just did she not even bother dictating it, but whoever ghostwrote her book for her just copied and pasted from Wikipedia, a bit like Rachel Reeves actually did recently.
What was Kamala Harris doing in 2009 which warranted her to write a book?
California prosecutor.
Oh yeah.
I believe this book was called Smart on Crime. The irony is, of course, that Kamala Harris, however you bloomin' say
Who cares?
kept people in prison long beyond evidence that exonerated them, that put them on either death row, or kept them past their prison sentence because she wanted to use them as slave labour for the volunteer firefighter brigade in California, and also locked people up for marijuana violations, which I don't really care about, but then bragged about smoking weed during the 2020 presidential cycle because she wanted to ingratiate herself with black Americans. So she broke her own laws and then laughed about it.
She wanted to be cool.
Yeah. America's why not, ladies and gentlemen. Right, so we'll start off with the most sort of headline-grabbing, absurd claim and then get into the rest of them, because this is actually a little bit of old news, because Stephen Crowder has mentioned this for a long time, but nobody's really picked up on it till now, because, let's be frank, Harris wasn't really that relevant. But it turns out that the multiple passages in her book, Smart on Crime, A Career Prosecutor's Plan to Make Us Safer, while also bailing out BLM rioters, were lifted from Wikipedia and other sources without attribution, according to Stefan Weber, who's an Austrian academic and dubbed a plagiarism hunter. He's done a massive 49-page report on this, so there's lots of examples. But one of the funniest ones among the examples from content from Wikipedia and an Associated Press story from 2008 is a story in which the now Democrat candidate for president wrote, quote, "My mother used to laugh when she told the story about a time I was fussing as a toddler. She leaned down to ask me, 'Kamala, what's wrong? What do you want?' And I wailed back, 'Freedom,' spelt with a W." How adorable. She's been a civil rights champion since she was in the stroller.
Got a bad taste in my mouth just on the surface of it, let alone if it's plagiarised.
That's amazing. Theatre kids all the way down throughout government. This is just like what I said with David Lammy's speech. They really do think that they are the primary character in a big Hollywood drama.
After the roaring success of our UK election coverage, we are indeed doing another massive Lotus Eaters livestream to cover the US elections on Tuesday, the 5th of November. We will have a giant roster of guests, both in the studio and remotely via Zoom, and we will be live streaming on Rumble, so we'll be able to say exactly what we think, no holds barred. Do tune in, it's going to be great, and hopefully we'll be ringing in Trump's second term, or perhaps we'll be having a massive meltdown. Who knows what the future holds. See you then.
Yeah, well,
Like, she's like Forrest Gump in more ways than one.
This is peak ethno-narcissism, of course, because she never thought that she'd be caught out for this. But she's trying to ingratiate herself in the civil rights tradition. I would have argued she should have done it a bit more subtle than literally just ripping off Martin Luther King, because this is a story from his Playboy magazine interview in 1965, and the quote goes, "I will never forget a moment in Birmingham, Alabama, when a white policeman accosted a little Negro girl," this is his word, not mine, 7 or 8 years old, "who was walking in a demonstration with her mother. 'What do you want?' the policeman asked her gruffly, and the little girl looked him straight in the eye and answered, 'Freedom.'" Now, unless Kamala Harris magically aged up 1 or 2 years to be 7 or 8...
About 7 years, actually.
Yeah, and then also was in Birmingham, Alabama for no reason, and talking to Martin Luther King rather than her own mother, this is bollocks.
The answer is obvious, Connor. We all know it exists. We all hear about it constantly. Black girl magic.
True, yes, absolutely. The power of joy allowed her to travel through time or something. Anyway, what isn't publicised in this is the full findings of other blatant plagiarism, which has been catalogued by claimer of scalps Chris Rufo. And I bring up Chris Rufo because do we all remember what Chris Rufo was doing at the start of this year? Anyone remember Claudine Gay?
Oh yeah, I was about to say if she was the head of Harvard or a similar educational institution, she would be fired.
Yeah, well, former head of Harvard now, Claudine Gay, got ousted because Chris Rufo publicised how her doctoral thesis and various other articles were riddled with about 50 instances of plagiarism.
Quite like Martin Luther King himself, actually.
Ironically, yeah. Again, Reverend Martin Luther King denying the incarnation of Christ. On the up and up. I suppose we should judge Claudine Gay Kamala Harris and Martin Luther King by the content of their character, and given he was party to rape, I would find it wanting. Anyway, so these appeared in 8 of her works. This is according to far-right outlet The Washington Post. A 1993 essay in the magazine Origins, her dissertation from 1997, a 2001 working paper, and 5 articles she published while a professor at Stanford and Harvard, so 11 journal publications across her career. In some cases, Gay took verbatim wording, ranging from sentences and entire paragraphs from academics that she cited, but without placing that text in quotation marks, or with citations. In other examples, she appears to have paraphrased or lightly modified the text she drew on, without citing the source in the same paragraph. Basically, she just copy-pasted and didn't attribute properly.
That's really bad. I mean, I'm not an academic, but I have got a postgraduate, in a humanities. A master's degree in a humanities subject, and it's really bad. That's really quite bad. You can't do that. It's straight up sort of lying. It's cheating, really.
This is pre-software to catch it as well.
Yeah, this guy, what was his name?
Claudine Gay.
No, the guy.
Chris Rufo.
Chris Rufo. He's doing good work. That's a cool thing he's doing. And call these people out for it, because it's easy enough to put it in quotations or put a citation, but to claim it's your own.
Yeah, the other thing about what I was going to say to you is that it's actually really easy not to plagiarise people.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It's the easiest thing in the world. Yeah. You've done all of the work in reading the book that you're taking from. So, quotation marks, a little citation note, boom, easy.
Yeah. Because there's different levels of copying, plagiarising. There's different sort of degrees of it, aren't there? But the outright verbatim paragraphs, there's no excuse. Because everyone sort of copies from everyone else in a way, in all sorts of ways. Sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes you come to the same conclusion as someone else legitimately. Sometimes you'll basically take someone else's words and just quote them. Also, there's all different degrees of how severe it is.
An easy one is if you're just referring to an actual factual matter, a matter of factual history, then if somebody's put it really well, then yeah, you'll take some of the wording from that, but also you should probably attribute it anyway.
Right, yeah. Or if you've read something that you completely agree with and you essentially rewrite it, okay, that's a form of plagiarism light, in a way, but you can't really stop people from doing that exactly. But if you take verbatim whole sentences or paragraphs, there's no excuse for that. That's straight up cheating. It's low.
Have you considered, as the Associated Press have, who Kamala Harris has later ripped off, they've just called any accusations of plagiarism a weapon by conservatives.
Is it?
Standards.
Is it?
Accurate citations. Humility. The latest conservative weapon.
Honesty being a right-wing weapon.
True, actually, if you look at Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because, as you've said, lifting entire paragraphs is a bit blatant, right? The potential next president of the United States wouldn't have done that. Oh dear. Well, Chris Rufo's got a thread, and he just keeps posting all of these new examples. Here's a pretty egregious one from the Associated Press. So, Harris's book reads, in Detroit's public schools, only 25% of students who enrolled in grade 9 graduated from high school, while 30.5% graduated in Indianapolis public schools and 34% received diplomas in the Cleveland Municipal School District. And then it goes on, and you see that exact text replicated, minus a couple of percentage point stats, in the Associated Press article.
Again, this is what I was just referring to. There are facts and figures and statistics and historical events that sometimes, you'll take what somebody else has said about them because they've put it better than you can word it right now. But you still source it. You still cite it when you do that.
And if it was one, fair enough.
Because that looks like, that's so funny. They've literally cut, paste, and delete the 0.9 and the 0.1 and think they'll get away with it.
If I add like 5 words in between the sentences, they won't notice.
Yeah.
And again,
I went to university, and you did as well. They have technology that you can. There are programs that you can just put an entire essay in or an entire book, and within 5 minutes, it will tell you everything that has been taken and lifted and not cited properly, and where it was taken from as well. It's remarkable how accurate they can be.
And if it was just one example, fair enough. If she's just starting one study, fair enough. If she lifted literally the entire page of a book and just added the word additional.
That's the same thing.
That's
amazing.
That's unbelievable.
Just additional. No one will know.
Like your magic.
Done.
Yeah.
and it just keeps going. I mean, here's Wikipedia, for example.
My favourite source of information.
Oh my god.
Oh,
that's laughable.
At least here she took out in order. So it was a removal rather than an addition this time.
Clever.
She was keeping them looking, keeping them on their toes.
We can laugh about this. This is the potential next vice president of the United States. Sorry, president of the United States, current vice president, and basically de facto president because Joe Biden doesn't know where he is.
I don't
This
think
is who's
Kamala
governing.
Harris is in charge of the country.
Well, fair point. But she does have a disproportionate amount of say, and is at some of the most important meetings with world leaders.
Well, yes.
And America, at least, is meant to maintain its global empire, and this person's in charge. Someone who couldn't even rip off Wikipedia properly.
One, it's just obviously dishonest. And two, it does say, doesn't it? It suggests that you're incapable of coming up with your own words. Everything I've written, I can say that is just completely original. The closest I ever came to it is in one article I wrote about space. I've done a few on space. I peppered the first half or so of my article with 2 or 3 or very small quotes from Carl Sagan. Then later in the article I said, if anyone hasn't noticed, I've been plagiarising Carl Sagan throughout this article. It's not difficult, it's not difficult. If you just do that and pretend it's your words.
It speaks to a profound insecurity about your own intellect.
Yeah, or that you don't have one.
Yeah.
Really.
Look, there's
Yeah.
good offhand phrases that, for example, my deprogrammed co-host Harrison Pitter sometimes said, and I'm not just going to nick them for my own. It's very easy to just go, as Harrison would often say, or the other day on the podcast when there was a criticism about Hope Not Hate, you just reflexively, because you're a humble man, Bo, just said, oh yeah, Connor's done a good breakdown of Hope Not Hate. You didn't try and pass the knowledge off as your own.
That would be weird.
Bo
to a normal person, a normal truthful person, that would be weird.
Bo sits there and goes, well, actually, recently I've done an amazing analysis of Hope Not Hate. You should check it out on the website. I got Connor to read it for me.
I did all the work. Connor merely read it.
So Rufo, at the end of this thread, he links to his Substack, and he's got like more examples here. And you think, okay, right, this is the bombshell. And then it just keeps going. Like, he just keeps posting new ones. I mean, for example, she's just ripped off Goodwill here, just completely, almost word for word, just taking out more than she's actually kept in her book. So she's ripping off a discount clothing shop, right?
Say, what's Goodwill?
It's basically a charity store from...
okay, right. Yeah,
right, okay.
Hear of that, yeah.
So I suppose that she's, I don't know, had the words donated to her or something. Here's another one from the California government website, which she was working for at the time, but there you go. All right. And here's one from the CDC, who haven't exactly got the best reputation these days. But yeah, zero citations. Just passing this off as research that she herself has done, clearly. So then the publisher did a bit of a boo-boo, because Rufo's been releasing all this, and they accidentally copied in his team to an internal email exchange.
Oh, no.
Right.
And it says, regarding publicity for the book, per Laura Hoffman, VP Executive Director of Marketing and Publicity for Chronicle Books, please do not respond or comment on any inquiries regarding Smart on Crime, and please continue to forward them directly to me. So they're in proper damage control mode, because they failed to vet this during the editing process. Instead, of course, they allow the corporate press to act as their attack dog with absurd headlines like the following. Conservative activist seizes on passages from Harris's book in the New York Times. Conservatives noticing, pouncing, as Ben Shapiro once said, is the problem, rather than just blatant plagiarism from the presidential candidate that the New York Times is probably going to endorse.
Also, I've just checked. You can still get her book on Amazon, on the Kindle version. She has another book from 2020 called The Truths We Hold, and I think that might warrant a similar comb through.
I think it's probably light on said truths. Let's be fair.
It used to be the case, I mean, even in my lifetime, that if you were caught out doing plagiarism, you were sort of done in the public eye. You were thought of as a shyster. It's like, or if you're just caught out lying, for example, or just getting things consistently wrong, like Rachel Maddow or something. If you were caught doing that, then it was curtains for your career, really. But it just seems now the paradigm has shifted or changed, and now it's just she'll laugh it off or something, or just say no, that's not real, or I don't know what.
Well, you've gotten very close. You've gotten very close to the defence. Okay. What other defence do they usually use to obfuscate criticism like this? Any takers?
Just racism.
Bingo! Bo wins the Lotus
Always
bingo for today.
I'm guessing that on that Harvard chart or whatever it was, the Smithsonian chart of whiteness, honesty is on there. Citations. White people are known for citing their sources. So this was a rebellious act of blackness.
Yeah, quite. I'm sure the New York Times will be
Or
spinning
Indianness.
that
We're still not sure.
any day now. So I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs from this because they're absurd. Chris Rufo is part of a loose confederation of conservative writers and activists who, during the past year, have tried to expose plagiarism among academics, many of whom have been black scholars who work in the field of diversity and inclusion.
This is like if he was a police officer trying to stop domestic violence and it just happened that most of them were committing it were black or something.
Just stop making the job easier, I suppose, by literally putting diversity hires as your brand ambassadors. The passages called into question by Mr. Rufo on his Substack platform involve about 500 words in the approximately 65,000 word, 200-page book. We will get back to that shortly because, as you've seen by the screenshots, doesn't seem plausible that it's that few number of words. Jonathan Bailey, they've called him an expert here, a plagiarism consultant in New Orleans and the publisher of Plagiarism Today, said on Monday that his initial reaction to Mr. Rufo's claims was that the errors were not serious given the size of the document. Quote, "This amount of plagiarism amounts to an error and not an intent to defraud," he said, adding Mr. Rufo had taken a relatively minor citation mistake in a large amount of text and tried to make a big deal out of it. So, right.
But there were pages and pages and pages and pages of it, by the looks of it.
How weird the Times wouldn't present this to their expert. But we've at least reached the stage of, we've gone from, it's not happening, to, well, it might be happening, but it's barely happening, and how does this affect you personally? So we're at stage 2, we haven't got to it's a good thing yet.
So even if it was only the one page, it's still, I mean, you just don't do that. You don't do that. Like, I can think of a black scholar who cites everything he writes, which is Thomas Sowell, because that man can't go a single bloody page without citing 15 different sources, probably because he knows, well, I don't want to be dishonest, do I?
What about
It's
Larry
very
Elder,
easy.
who's written essentially an autobiography of both him and his father and their correspondence? The story's very compelling. He was one of the people that was involved in, let's say, my red pilling. He didn't need to rip off stories from Martin Luther King to sound interesting. Funny that, isn't it?
If it's 500 words out of 60, 70,000, that's still way too many. You could write 200,000 words, and if there's like 12 words in a row, that's not cool.
Especially if you're trying to be president of the United States. I think the qualifications bar should be pretty high there. So Rufo just went, someone hang this in the Louvre. Because obviously, they're saying, I seized upon obvious plagiarism, and therefore it's racist. But then Rufo provides some evidence that the New York Times, well, he says they're lying, let's say have been misrepresenting truths. So the claims in here, as he's got with screenshots and emails to send over to people to investigate this, the New York Times, quote, deliberately withheld crucial contextual information from its readers and from the supposed plagiarism expert by downplaying, quote, dozens of documented examples of vicious plagiarism as being only 500 words. Bear in mind, the report by the Austrian expert in question was 49 pages. You can't make 49 pages out of 500 words. So that doesn't sound right. Quote, the Times claims that none of the passages in question took the ideas or thoughts of another writer. This is preposterous. Harris not only copied multiple paragraphs of other people's work verbatim, but she often lifted those ideas directly and at face value. In one case, she came to the wrong conclusion because she copied Wikipedia. So she contradicted herself because she just lifted a quote straight from Wikipedia and didn't check it. Throbbing brain on that vice president. The Times also covered less severe examples of plagiarism than Rufo himself cited, omitting the ones that he himself has posted to X, and probably will continue to post at the time that this goes up. And he just said, flashback to the time that the Times, the corporate press vanguard, ran cover for Claudine Gay immediately after he published that, and look at how it ended for her career. But then quite interesting, the same pattern has followed. The New York Times defends the person in question, pressure keeps going, and then of all places, CNN then decides to say, well, yeah, there is some legitimacy to this. Because that's what happened with Gay, and that's now what's happened with Harris. Quote from CNN, plagiarized works include using someone else's work without giving them proper or appropriate credit for their ideas and words. Even if the source of the information is cited, it is still considered plagiarism if the ideas are not paraphrased or quoted in the correct place, experts told CNN late last year. CNN reviewed several of the passages highlighted by Rufo and found that Harris and OC Hamilton failed to properly attribute language to sources. So the corporate press have started throwing Harris under the bus.
Experts told CNN. You mean any undergrad? An expert. What do you mean? Well, anyone who's got an A level.
Or eyes.
Yeah.
Or anybody who literally just has access to the fact-checking software that universities provide.
Well, as we've learned recently, Harry doesn't even have basic reading comprehension, and even he can see it. So
There you go, see?
fantastic. So one final thing. As you've pointed out, well, plagiarism should disqualify you from any position in public life, let alone being vice president or president. So someone has pointed out, isn't it brilliantly ironic that Kamala Harris could be caught in a plagiarism scandal when this is exactly what happened to Joe Biden in 1988? He dropped out of running for president because he stole speeches and life details from Neil Kinnock.
Really?
He tried
I
to
didn't
steal
know that one.
life details
He
from
did.
He was born in Wales.
He lifted full-on details from Neil
As an
Kinnock.
Irish Catholic Welshman, I, Joe Biden.
Neil Kinnock.
So, just to conclude, fun October surprise this is. It will keep unfolding. I'm sure we'll bring you updates. But Kamala Harris is a vapid moron who's grifted her way into the second highest office in the land. Don't let her get to the highest.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can watch our book club on How They Broke Britain by James O'Brien. Carl, Harry and I basically go mad discussing the ravings of a lunatic, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.